Britain bans transgender surgeries for minors. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. You heard that right. I didn't say Bahrain or Burma. I said Britain. We're going to take a look at the announcement coming from the Boris Johnson conservative government, how it fits in to larger trends around the world of the reversal of transgender rights, and why we can expect such a reversal is actually just getting started. I think you're really going to find it quite interesting. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. A super happy Tuesday to each and every one of you. If you are looking for your daily white pill of encouragement to help you counter all the ridiculous fake news that's out there from the corporatist globalist media, you have found your oasis. We analyze current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So you know what to do if you haven't already done so. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You're going to love being a regular part of this channel and interacting with this wonderful network of conservatives from all over the world. Now, before we dive in here, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that is collagen, available at healthwithsteveturley.com. Now, if you don't know, collagen may be the closest thing we'll ever get to a real fountain of youth. Many health experts now agree that consuming collagen really is crucial as it renews and revitalizes how you look and feel. Taking collagen regularly can revitalize your body, can make your skin, bones, even your hair look and feel more healthy and youthful. Now, if you're interested in learning more about collagen and getting your own supply, then visit healthwithsteveturley.com or just click on the link below and check it out. You'll be glad that you did. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. I want to give a huge shout out to our good friend George, a subscriber to this channel, for his sending me this article. It's really interesting stuff. The Telegraph is reporting that the UK has indeed decided to ban transgender sex change surgeries for all minors, all Brits under the age of 18. This move has been announced by the so-called British Equalities Minister. Yes, Britain does have an Equalities Minister. Its announcement was made going into the weekend that no one under the age of 18 would be allowed to undergo sex reassignment surgery or gender reassignment surgery. The minister made it clear that any children who wish to undergo surgery to change their gender will from now on be banned from doing so. And of course, critics, particularly those with a more pro-transgender perspective, are accusing the Boris Johnson conservative government of instituting what they're calling new forms of inequality introduced into British medical practice. But regardless, what is interesting here is that Boris Johnson, we have to remember, was the one-time mayor of London, and he has a bit of a reputation of being a rather outspoken supporter and advocate of LGBT rights, but apparently not when it comes to reconstructive surgery for minors. Johnson is clearly drawing a line here. Now, in terms of the big picture of what we're seeing here coming out of Britain, I think it's an indicator of a larger trend that's been going on over the last couple of years now. A number of pundits and reporters are recognizing that transgender rights, which seem to be on such an unstoppable march literally just months ago, are now going through a major reversal in major parts of the world. Just take the United States, for example. The Trump administration has taken a number of steps to reverse transgender rights trends that were characterized by the Obama administration. One of the first things that Trump administration did after taking office was to revoke an Obama-led directive to school districts across the country that mandated them to allow students to use restrooms and locker rooms consistent with their so-called gender identity. Since their issuance, the Obama-issued guidelines caused quite a stir among local education officials, with some superintendents openly defying the directive, but that Obama directive died with the coming into the Trump administration. Schools can now require that students use the restrooms and locker rooms consistent with their biological gender as designated at birth. Furthermore, Trump very early on instituted a ban on transgenders from openly serving in the military, and he announced this via Twitter, that the Pentagon would no longer allow transgender people to serve openly in the United States military, which again effectively reversed an ordinance issued by the Obama administration. Trump explained that the decision was made after consulting with military personnel, commanders, experts, so he wasn't alone in this decision. It was widely agreed among military personnel that transgenderism was inconsistent with military protocol and discipline. And in terms of individual states, Idaho became the first state to ban transgender athletes. Now, the big issue here, of course, is that we're beginning to see young people who are biologically male, but who identify as female, enter into, female competitive sports. That's hardly commensurate with fair play. So we're talking, transgender wrestlers or track and field competitors who are increasingly making it difficult for females to compete in their own sports. And so the government of the state of Idaho has officially banned the practice. They no longer allow for transgender athletes to compete, particularly in women's sports. But obviously the UK and the United States are not alone in this. We just reported the other week on the nation of Hungary, which is taking the reversal even further. Hungary's right-wing government is pushing through legislation that will officially end the legal recognition of transgenderism in the nation of Hungary. The Nationalist Populist Prime Minister Viktor Orban has approved of legislation that would force transgender people to have to affirm the same gender as designated on their birth certificates, and the legislation would define gender as the biological sex based on primary sex characteristics and chromosomes, which of course would make it impossible for people to legally change their gender. The legislation does indeed institute a complete and total ban on so-called gender reassignment therapy and surgery altogether in Hungary. Also, the Putin administration, Russia, they've implemented what's notoriously referred to as the gay propaganda law, which seeks to protect minors from any advocacy of what Russians call non-traditional sexual relations. And then moving over to Latin America, Jair Bolsonaro's Brazil has begun to defund LGBT programs, both in schools and even in the arts, particularly in terms of funding movie and screenplay projects. And in Paraguay, the conservative government there declared Paraguay officially a pro-life and pro-family nation, which has officially turned its back on any funding or promotion for pro-LGBT causes and legislation. So clearly what's going on in Britain is part of a much larger trend of transgender rights reversals going on throughout many parts of the world. Now, again, I'm just highlighting a representative sample of that. The list actually goes on. And again, I'm interested in reversals, right? Trend reversals. So that's why I tend to leave Africa and the Middle East out of the list, since they were never exemplifying pro-transgender political sentiments or trajectories to begin with. So what is going on here? Well, we talked about this last week. I believe it was in one of last week's videos, but I think it's an absolutely essential dynamic for us to understand precisely why we're beginning to see a new conservative age emerge here, at least in terms of traditional gender norms returning. What we have to understand is that our conceptions of gender and sexuality are inextricably linked with our conceptions of procreation, okay? We have to make sure we understand that link, because I think it's going to help us make sense of the big picture of what's going on here and what to expect. Our conceptions of gender and sexuality are inextricably linked with our conceptions of procreation. Scholars have noted that our perceptions of sex and sexuality changed dramatically in the modern age, and that's largely because of the advent of modern contraception. What modern contraception did is it increasingly amputated or separated sex from marital and familial structures. In other words, with modern contraception, sex could be both thought of and practiced apart from marriage and apart from the family. And this, of course, is because pregnancy was no longer an inevitable outcome of sexual relations. And indeed, this separation of sex from procreation, it was actually integral to the whole rationale behind the Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion in all 50 states. Abortion is simply one among many options constitutive of modern birth control. So as far as the justices were concerned behind the Roe v. Wade decision, the sexual norms and practices in the modern age are based on birth control. And if birth control fails, there has to be a backup. Hence, the legalization of abortion. So the important point here is that once sex is separated from fertility, it could no longer hold on to the exclusivity of heterosexual norms. Heterosexual norms are inextricably linked to the natural inseparability between sex and procreation. The moment you artificially separate those two from one another, right? Sex and pregnancy in the context of marriage, it's over. There's no longer any basis for a heterosexual norm. There's no longer any gender norm in that sense. It's gone. Its foundation has imploded, and so has its exclusivity and normalcy. So the important point here is that both abortion and homosexual relationships and gender fluidity, they share the same modern source, which is the separation of sex from fertility. Again, this is widely recognized. Now, what we have to understand is that the opposite is also true. In other words, if there is an inextricable link between gender fluidity and abortion, with abortion sort of paving the way for the acceptance of gender fluidity, what happens when cultures begin turning away from abortion? Well, that's precisely what we're seeing here in the United States. That's what we're seeing in Hungary, in Russia, in Brazil, in Paraguay, and yes, even in Britain. A number of recent polls show that Brits are overwhelmingly supportive of more restrictions on abortion, such as lowering the time limit for abortion from 16 weeks or lower, which would be akin to the policies that we're seeing in pro-life nations such as Hungary or Russia. So the important point here is that as nations become more pro-life, or trending in a more general pro-life direction, which is what's been happening of late for a number of reasons. I mean, we've gotten into this before. One of the major reasons is that the world's becoming more nationalist, and national sentiments tend to be pro-life. We have studies on that. And in Europe in particular, pro-life sentiments they're a rather organic response to the fertility and demographic crisis that's ravaged virtually every nation in that continent. So as populations trend towards a more general pro-life direction, then it only follows that we're going to begin to see a comparable restrictiveness when it comes to homosexual and transgender norms. I just don't see any way around that given their common rationale. Both abortion and transgenderism require the separation between sex and procreation, and a pro-life culture more and more reestablishes that very connection. And by reestablishing that very connection between sex and procreation, inevitably LGBT and transgender issues become increasingly implausible. So of course we'll keep our eyes on how things develop, but we're certainly seeing more and more indicators that a new, more traditionalist conservative age is indeed rising right before our very eyes. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video on how the mainstream Marxist media has been utterly humiliated with President Trump's soaring poll numbers. You're going to absolutely love it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.